So, Qualcomm claims that the Snapdragon X Elite offers the most performance you can get on a Windows machine while offering the best battery life. Meanwhile, we have the Core Ultra 7 2nd series from Intel, once again sometimes called Lunar Lake. This is the normal processor based on x86 architecture, the one that you probably have in your Windows laptop right now. It is a complete redesign from Intel processors we've seen in the past, which allows it to be very performant while also sipping on battery life. So in other words, Intel is making the exact same claim here, that this is the best way to experience Windows with the best battery life. I've already made a video going over what it was like spending a week with a Snapdragon X Elite chip. I used that in a Dell XPS 13 laptop. So what I've done now is I've gotten a hold of the exact same laptop, a Dell XPS 13 model, but with a Lunar Lake chip instead. This is giving me a great way to compare the two processors because everything else is basically the same across these two laptops. Granted, I'm not telling you that you need to buy one of these two laptops, but I'm just going to tell you my experience with these chips so that you can decide which chip you should buy in the laptop that you are looking at right now. Now, I said that these chips are very different, but they are kind of the same in a few key areas. Let's start with battery life. With battery life, you're going to see very similar results across both chips. We're talking 8 hours of work without needing to charge. For the Snapdragon X Elite and for the Lunar Lake model, I was able to go a full 8-hour workday without charging the laptop, using it in its regular balanced performance mode with the screen on the entire time. This is something that you just wouldn't be able to see from any other Windows laptop with a processor that's not the X Elite or Lunar Lake. Performance is also mostly the same. You will see some differences between single core and multi-core tasks. For example, your multi-core tasks on the Snapdragon X Elite are going to be a little bit better than the multi-core tasks on Lunar Lake. But on the flip side, your single core tasks with Lunar Lake are going to be better than what you see on the Snapdragon X Elite. Even fan noise and power consumption are basically the same across these two platforms. If you're firing up both of these laptops and really pushing the limit, you might hear some fan noise here and there. But once again, for your basic daily tasks, you're not going to hear the fans at all. They're basically going to be silent machines. The core difference between these two processors I've already touched on, which is that the Snapdragon model uses Windows on ARM and the Intel model uses normal Windows. This can create very different experiences for the end user. There are 3 disadvantages to using Lunar Lake when compared to the Snapdragon model, so let's talk about those real quick. First, even though Lunar Lake supports more PC games than the Snapdragon X Elite, there's no way to attach a discrete GPU to a Lunar Lake chip. That means that you're not going to be able to get a laptop with an NVIDIA GPU inside and play a lot of high-end games. So, if you're a big gamer looking to buy a great gaming laptop, stay away from Lunar Lake. 2. Lunar Lake is very expensive for Intel to make because Intel needs to outsource a lot of the materials used to create it. Intel has already said that Lunar Lake is essentially a one-off production. Whatever comes next after Lunar Lake for laptops is not going to be like this, and we're probably going to go back to having pretty weak battery life. And the reason for this is because what I just talked about, which is that Lunar Lake chipset is way too expensive for Intel to make long term. So, in other words, Lunar Lake is kind of a flash in the pan kind of thing. Whereas once again, Qualcomm and Microsoft are working to make the Snapdragon X platform the de facto Windows laptop platform. So we're gonna see way more options for Qualcomm, so I promised I would give you a definitive answer here. Which processor should you go with? Well, let me talk about first which people should not buy either processor. Creative professionals should avoid both of these processors. If you're somebody who works in graphic design or audio production or anything like that, you probably don't want either of these. The reason is because a lot of the programs that you rely on may not work on the Snapdragon model, and with the Lunar Lake laptops, you're only limited to 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes of RAM because the RAM is actually built into the processor itself. If you need more RAM than that, you can't get it. Also, as mentioned before, you can't get a Lunar Lake model with a discrete GPU, so that takes that out of the equation as well. Gamers should also stay away from both of these. I've already talked about how you can't play a lot of games on the Snapdragon X model, and even with Lunar Lake, some of those games aren't going to play that well because, once again, you don't have a discrete GPU ability. So even Horizon Forbidden West, which is one of my favorite games, is basically unplayable due to this glitch you're seeing right here. This makes it so you can't go to save points and you can't craft items, so you're basically not able to play the game. Obviously, I didn't play every game out there, so I don't know how many other bugs and errors there are, but if you can't play this one, chances are high there are a lot of other games you can't play either. Finally, students should probably avoid both of these chips as well because they're so expensive. If you're on a student budget, you should probably just stick with a Chromebook. Unless you have a very generous relative or some other bit of luck like that, you don't want either of these chips.